All right, we're back. Week 5 now. We got Draftkings lineups have come out. We're going to analyze these lineups. I'm going to show you what my first look is looking like for Week 5 after probably one of the chalkiest weeks we've had in a while. If you played the chalk last week in cash, you did well. If you played the chalk last week in tournaments, you probably placed somewhere in there. You might even have won something big. But basically, we're going to look through Week 5 this week. I'm going to just show my first look going through it. This is my first time looking at any of the prices, anything like that. It's Tuesday, Monday. I just like to gather as much research as possible, look back at what I did the week before. Like I said, it was a very chalky week, so in cash, I did pretty good, hitting on 65% of my cash games. And in tournaments, I didn't do as well with going not so chalky in the tournaments, as I probably would have done better if I did. But let's jump into my MacBook right now, and we'll see what I'm looking at this week. All right, so we have this week, Week 5 of the NFL already, a quarter of the way done, which is very quick. But let's look at it right now. So, I mean, a couple things just to point out after last week. Like I said, if you went chalk, if you went Tyler Boyd, Sterling Shepard, the most owned. The one thing that surprised me the most was Ezekiel Elliott. Was the most owned player, I think, in the Millie Maker. He was over 30% owned. He was the most owned player on most slates, most tournament slates. Very surprising for me. I knew he was going to be owned. Some of the ownership projections that I use Roto Grinders. They're pretty decent. They were looking around 15%, maybe closer to 20, depending on where Saquon Barkley was going to be utilized. 30% is high. We thought Giovanni Bernard was going to be the most owned player, if not Alvin Kamara. Having Zeke there is definitely surprising. So I did have Zeke in almost all my lineups, and I thought I was going to have some an edge there, contrarian a little bit, based on having Zeke, Kamara, Gordon, Saquon, Gio Bernard up there. But really no edge with Zeke at all. But having him obviously in an eruption game, 37 points, whatever he might have had, it was obviously leverage and not so contrarian as I thought it would be. But getting into this slate here, that's just something that I thought I would point out. Another big surprising performance. I had him in a couple of leagues, George Kittle, with his quarterback from college. Obviously had a good connection there. He had over, 120 yards and a touchdown, all coming off of really that touchdown of 80 yards. But still, he got peppered with targets. And then that's really it. Eric Ebron came through late. He was chalk. That probably helped a lot of cash game lineups that used him. This week, I kind of went with the very contrarian with Ellison. Just a solid 3 catches for 30 yards, whatever he had this week. Nothing great. And I had a lot of Jimmy Graham and Tyler Eifert, who both had early touchdowns. Jimmy Graham just didn't get anything after that. Eifert, obviously, we know he all got hurt. Let's get into this lineup here. So just looking here, starting now, looking at the quarterback slate, we see Big Ben against Atlanta. Atlanta's defense, them in Tampa is bad. I don't think Tampa plays this week. But we can see Big Ben, most quarterback. If you know me, just kind of saying that I don't really go after quarterbacks. I don't spend too much up in quarterbacks, especially in cash. Maybe if I think there's an edge in a tournament, I'll go higher on a quarterback. But looking at this right now, Big Ben, most owned player or highest salary player. And then we got Phillip Rivers. We got guys, Matt Ryan having a great year. I mean, if we look at his log right here, I mean, look at that. Week 1, obviously, blundered. Philly, they couldn't score in the red zone at the end. They couldn't score the whole game in the red zone. Since then, they've converted a lot. Sarkisian and all that, they've been doing good. Look at that. I mean, those stats are crazy for fantasy, especially DraftKings. 4-point quarterback passing touchdown. He obviously had the 2 rushing touchdowns that 1 week. Going down a little bit more, Jared Goff, tough matchup in Seattle. That could be something where they ground him. Cam Newton here at 6,400. This is interesting to me. I mean, you get the dual threat. You're going to get the rushing yards as well as the passing. He's been solid all year so far. Week 1, if his floor is going to be 18 points for you or around there, I don't think his floor is below 15 for Cam Newton. It's very impressive when he does get over 30 yards a week rushing. He can get in the end zone. He did twice his last game. They're coming off the bye now, so you're going to expect some things going on. Just sliding down here, Mariota's pretty high at 6,100. That's interesting, especially at Buffalo. Bills play a lot better over there. A couple things that are going to stand out. Carson Wentz for cash game, that's definitely viable. He's at home against Minnesota. Their defense once was feared. This year is not looking great at all. A couple injuries there. Everson Griffin's been out a little bit. We're looking down here, Baker Mayfield, probably one of the most owned quarterbacks last week. Excitement factor. He came out. He was cheap. He's cheap again. I think he's the exact same price. That's a way to go. Maybe go contrarian in tournaments. Derek Carr had a great week last week. He's been having a great year. I mean, I'm looking at this right off the bat, right off salary and some other things that I researched already. And I mean, the thing that I like here is this guy, Kirk Cousins, $6,000. When you have that even floor number, 6,000, 7,000, 5,000. That usually in tournaments is a little contrarian play. People don't like to spend up to the round number. They think they're getting a discount at 5,900, or they'll spend up higher. just a little psychology behind it. So Kirk Cousins, I mean, he's having a great year. Blunder against Buffalo. Their whole team really didn't show up that week. I don't know how they couldn't move the ball on them. But also the Packers didn't move the ball on them either. But obviously when he's throwing the ball, and he's throwing the ball a lot this year, I mean, he's averaging probably around 48 throws a game. The last 3 he's averaging over 35 each time. He's averaging closer to 50 each game, especially over the last 2 games. So I like Kirk Cousins here. So let's plug him in there and see what we could do. In a spot where I feel like he won't be as owned based on where you could spend up a little bit higher at QB here, and you can get some other values in Rodgers and Mahomes. Mahomes is interesting going up against Jacksonville. A lot of people come off of top offenses when they're playing top defenses. That's a contrarian spot. That's a spot where you can get a huge edge. Mahomes' ownership is probably going to be the lowest it's ever been, but as you can see, he's produced every single week. And his salary really doesn't go up that much, and it's a huge dip, $800 dip, $800 dip. But let's put Cousins in there and see what we can do. I like Mahomes, though, as well, especially in tournaments. That's something that I might actually look into. So you see we don't have Kamara here, and we don't know right now what's going on if we go down to this guy. We don't know if he's going to have the full workload. We don't know if Joe Mixon's going to have the full workload. But going down here, solid since Mixon's been out, probably the second, third most owned last week. Mixon reports, I think they said they're not certain if he's going to play. Yeah, isn't sure if Mixon will return. If Mixon comes back, obviously that dents both of their ownerships. We're not sure what the usage is going to be since Bernard's been great. You would think Mixon's going to go down to the early work, and then third down work might be Bernard for a little while. Looking through here, Todd Gurley's on the slate. He's back on the standard slate is what we're looking at here. Obviously, I always want to play Todd Gurley. I always want to play Kamara, if not both. Most solid guy of the year so far outside of Kamara and probably Gurley has been Melvin Gordon. Saquon's been solid, but he hasn't had a huge game. Gordon's had constant 30-point games, 3 of them right here. And I mean, his usage is something to keep an eye on. He's not getting a lot of carries when you think of a workhorse back, but his targets, I mean, he's getting 10, 4, 7, 13. 4 is just going to be the outlier, I think. It's weekly he's going to have anywhere from 5 to 10 targets. So that's something you want to look at. You want to look at usage for running backs, especially on Draftkings, where you can get PPR points. But we're looking at that. I like to either spend up high, especially for cash games. The running back's a place where I'll spend my money. I'll spend up high because you know they're going to get constant work. A wide receiver high, Julio, he might only end up with 4 catches in a week. You know a top running back's not going to get only 4 carries. They're going to get a lot more opportunities, especially if they're a pass catching back, which most of these higher salary ones are. So I'm actually going to plug Gordon in there. I like to spend up, or I like to wait later in the week when injuries come out and you know a backup running back like Bernard is going to get the full workload or something like that in weeks past. You can get cheap. You could spend up higher than at receiver, at tight end, even defense if you'd like. So I'm going to plug Gordon in there. I'm going to come back to see if we could fit Gurley, but for right now I'm going to hold off, especially in Seattle. I could see that being possibly a letdown week. I don't think Gurley's going to get any less usage, but maybe they come out to play Seattle on defense. They've looked a little bit better the last few weeks. McCaffrey's somebody I always want to play because he can get you 10 catches and he can also rush for 100-plus yards. He's done both of those this year so far. Last week, very different usage of him. He ran a lot. He got almost 30 carries, and as you can see here, he only got, 2 targets. He caught both of them, but that's a huge difference from the week before. Holding off on McCaffrey. Saquon's a guy that I always want to play just because he's going to get all the workload there, and he's not only going to get carries, he's going to get a ton of targets. He's going to get peppered with targets, as you can see. He's the number 2 option. If not, you can argue the number 1 option in the passing attack there. Odell recently has been locked up by some top corners, and he just hasn't been able to break free, as we're used to seeing Odell break free. He's getting a ton of targets and a ton of short catches. But looking through this, Fournette, he just can't stay healthy. David Johnson's very interesting. This is a guy whose salary, again, it's going to drop. And he's playing, a run defense that wasn't that great. Overall, I think it's pretty solid. I think it's better than you see here when it comes up in green, I think. Better than you see here at 24th. I think it's better than that stats-wise, but I think last week the Chargers took advantage of them. Melvin Gordon on the ground a little bit, also Ecular. But David Johnson's a guy that I would plug in here and just see what we can do. He's a guy that's interesting to me for cash game lineups because, again, if you draft him in season long, you draft him with the top 2 pick, probably number 1 overall. He has the talent. They got wide receivers out there with Christian Kirk. They got Larry Fitz still getting healthy. Rosen looked manageable. He almost looked like an Alex Smith type of guy, check down a little bit, a game manager. Their defense is still solid, Patrick Peterson. I'm going to bank on David Johnson right now. We're going to look through this. Let's see what we can do at receiver here. There's a guy that I actually want to go right to the flex. And it's risky. It's probably more of a tournament play, but Aaron Jones in the flex at running back. I always want to get guys in there who are going to catch the ball a little bit. Jones really isn't that guy, so this is different. But just looking at this, his usage, I'm a Packers fan. His usage is going through the roof since he came back 2 weeks ago. They just don't want to get out of the 3-headed monster. But I think Rodgers has voiced his complaints about that. They're going up against Detroit, who Zeke just ate all apart. Even if he gets only 15 carries, three touches on the ground, this guy is so explosive. He can easily get over 100 yards with that total, maybe a touchdown or two. Green Bay has to get back on track. I don't see them going away from him. I'm just going to plug that in there right now. If we're going to go cash purposes, I wouldn't do this, but I just want to see how this looks. So now let's build our wide receiver pool here. So if I'm going to go Cousins, I'm going Thielen. I mean, there's no question about that. I don't even have to look at this guy's targets to see he's probably getting over 12 a week. Yeah, 12, 19, 13, 12. Yeah, the guy's just getting peppered with targets. He's producing no matter what. I mean, even the week in Buffalo, the guy had, 19 targets? That's where he threw all of his damn passes, Cousins. Definitely going Thielen there. And honestly, you might even load up here with Diggs. Diggs going up against Philly. I think that could be a shootout, a sneaky shootout. I don't know what the over-under is in that game right now. If I had to guess, I'd say it's going to be somewhere around the 47, 48-point mark. But let's plug Diggs in here just to see how this is going to look if we want to stack them. 2 weeks ago, if you did that when they played Green Bay, you might have won the Millie Maker. You might have won some tournaments. They're only 1% owned in the Millie Maker or around there, which is ridiculous. So let's plug that in. I want to play Brown. But if I'm going to play Brown, I'm going to have to come off of some of my running backs. So I'm not going to play Brown right now, but I see him exploding this week in Atlanta. The other thing I like to point out, James Conner. I mean, I see Bell's coming back now, but James Conner, obviously Atlanta's giving up a lot of catches to running backs. They're giving up just a lot of points in general. But as you can see, he blew up in week 1, right? And it's just been a slight decline since, whether it's just the game flow or he just can't find space. It's more so he can't find space. Even when he blew up, he got a ton of carries. I mean, he had 31 carries. The Steelers aren't going to run the ball 31 times. So only getting 4 yards of carry in his best game so far. He's averaging closer to 3 yards of carry in the season. I don't think he's as good as everyone says. I think that's why Bell's coming back. We see reports after the bye. He gets some targets in the passing game. He could be solid, but for 7,500, I'm staying away. Wide receiver now, we have to go somewhere else here. We're going to have to go cheaper at wide receiver, defense, and tight end if this is the lineup that we want to form. So let's look a little bit. Corey Davis is solid. I played him in a lot last week just because he leads the league in target share, market share. He's getting like 34%, 36% of his team's targets, which is insane. 15 more last week. Nothing changing there. Going down a little more. Great week for Calvin Ridley. Ridley and Boyd, as you'll see, there's corrections there. They're up a little higher, closer to the $6,000 range, which they probably should be as solid number 2s, if not number 1 for Boyd in his offense right now while AJ was out. Marius Thomas, huge miss last night in that game. Could have won the game. If I want to run it back with the Eagles, I would look Aguilar here. But let's actually just plug in a cheap defense. I'm going to put in the Bills at home. The Bills play a lot better at home. Maybe not this year, but overall they do. And Tennessee's not that explosive on offense. I like them cheap right there. I actually thought they were going to be higher, so I just wanted to go right to them. So there's the Bills right there. We get some salary relief. I'm probably going to have to go cheap at tight end here. So let's see if there's any sub-3 tight ends. Ellison I played a lot of last week. I mean, he had 5 targets. That's pretty decent for a tight end who's a backup filling in. Not a lot of people owned him, but only 3 catches. This guy right here, I almost played him last night if I would have played just the captain mode. 9.7, 7 targets. 7 targets in his first official start with Jake Butt down. One of them was the biggest one, 36 yards, all came on that final drive. Somebody I'm definitely going to look at only 2,600. But I kind of want to look at, where's Hurst? So we want to look at opportunities, right? And we want to look at value. Tight end, though, it's a little hard. You kind of have to pay up, and you really don't know what you're going to get. I played a lot of Jimmy Graham last week. Didn't do great. Early on, he scored a touchdown. He had 2 catches for probably about 15 yards. And then after that, he just kind of fell off the face of the earth. I thought it was going to be a 20-point week for Graham. Didn't come up. Came up pretty short for me in a couple leagues. And low ownership. I think he was only at 4% owned in the Millie Maker. But if we're going to go for just safety here, I mean, Vance McDonald, somebody that you could always look at. But trying to get some salary relief, we're going to go Hunter Hurst is the guy I'm going to look at here. So plugging in Hunter Hurst, we don't know what he's going to do. We're going to monitor his health, but if he comes back, he's probably the number 2 target. I mean, I know you got a lot of mouths to feed out there, but all pretty middle of the pack wide receivers. I know Brown's been doing good. Crabtree's just had a ton of drops. I mean, 6 or 7 on the year. Willie Snead's out there, but this is where we want a guy with salary relief. I'm fine paying for him right there. I'm big on opportunities, not knowing what this opportunity is going to pan out to be. I'm just going to monitor it for the week. I know that they loved him. They loved him in training camp, so we're going to follow that. This leaves us with $5K to spend at wide receiver. So going in the $5K range and below that, I'm waiting for Larry Fitz. I almost played him a lot last week. I went with Kirk for salary relief, and Larry Fitz just really hasn't come through. I think he's playing with a little bit of an injury. Josh Rosen's missed him a couple of times, as well as some other players on that team when I watched some of their games. Looking here in this range, I mean, Mike Williams, he's definitely interesting to me. He had a down week. I think a lot of people are going to be off of him. But if we're going to look at just people that we trust, I think I'm going to go Seattle. I know against the Rams secondary that it's tough, but I mean, they're one man down out there with Talib out. Marcus Peters still a little banged up following that. But they didn't know how he was going to do coming back off this injury. Baldwin, he came back with 7 targets right away. I mean, 7 targets in a game where they didn't have to throw the ball too much. Wilson hasn't thrown the ball a lot, and he caught 5 of those targets, 41 yards. I could definitely see him having a 9-target game. He catches 6, 7, 80 yards and a touchdown. And for $5,000 to fit into the lineup, that's exactly what you want in cash. I'm looking over this lineup right now. I feel good at my QB. I feel great at wide receiver. All 3 wide receivers, especially Diggs. Depending on how, if this game's a shootout, you know you're going to win a lot with this lineup, high percentages. Could definitely look into these wide receivers a little bit more. But I think towards the end of the week, we're going to see a lot of chalk coming from some of these higher percentage games, or really just the Steelers and the Atlanta game. We're going to see a lot of chalk coming from that game, maybe Green Bay and Detroit. What other high-scoring games do we have up here? Let's see. I think Kansas City is going to be very interesting. Contrarian plays there with Tyreek and Mahomes and even Kelsey. But it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of high-scoring games. Minnesota and Philly, maybe. Outside of Minnesota and Philly, it's really just going to be Atlanta and Pittsburgh. That's where we're going to see a lot of chalk coming from. That's something that I could definitely reevaluate. Again, this is just a first look. Looking at Atlanta and Pittsburgh, something that I probably will actually, going into it towards the end of the week, play more in cash just because of the high team total. As far as tournaments go, I mean, Julio's never a bad tournament flyer. Antonio can shift the slate. Both of them can. Getting both of them in their lineup might be an advantage instead of kind of trying to stack these running backs when Kamara's not out there. One last thing I will mention, though, if Mixon's out, Gio Bernard at 6,800, he's filling in right away for me. I don't know if I'm going to squeeze him into the flex. I want to keep Gordon in. Aaron Jones, I put him in here out of excitement just because I know he's explosive being a Packers fan. Probably a guy I'm going to change, but as the tournaments go, he's probably a guy I'm going to play in a lot of tournaments. He's only 4,300, and he's probably going to get the majority of the carries out there. He took over the majority of the snaps after 1 week of being back, or his second week, but 1 full week of being back. And he had the most touches out there as well. I think that's something that we could definitely keep an eye on. He's definitely the better back overall, maybe not in pass catching specific roles. That's where Jamal Williams will come in. But as being explosive, getting goal line work, I think it's going to be Jones. So that's the spot that I would change. These 2 right here I'm a little iffy on with Hurst and Aaron Jones. We can come off of Diggs. We can find somebody really low value maybe. So let's check that out. If we kind of took out these guys and we kept this as our core, can we find a low value receiver? I mean, we've been able to the last couple weeks. Last week was just chalk. Christian Kirk, he's a guy I played last week. He's a guy that I actually like. I think Rosen in the preseason had a decent connection with him on limited snaps. I think 4 targets, caught 3 or 4 balls and a touchdown. Not bad. I mean, not bad target usage, 5, 8, and 5 for 3,700, almost going towards the minimum price. Willie Snead, somebody else who was interesting to me, 7, 5, 8. I mean, 3,900, that might be the guy as well. Just targets is what you're looking for here. But if we're going to play Hurst, then maybe not him. Getting a little higher now. I want to stay below 4K here, but let's see Jordy. Jordy obviously getting a lot of targets the last few weeks. He had an eruption game in the first half last weekend, the weekend before this. But what we're going to do here, we're going to basically, I'm going to plug in Christian Kirk. Again, take the flyer on him. Last week, I mean, at 3,700 last week, his price doesn't change at all, I believe. 3,700 last week. He had a great game 2 weeks ago. I think people are going to be off of him completely. We'll see what Richard Sherman's doing out there, but either way, I think Kirk's going to be fine. Rosen, another week to prepare, another week to look at him, the rookie-to-rookie connection. Let's plug in Kirk there, see what we could do. If we go low price to end here, we might be able to buy up at running back. So Hurst, maybe in a tournament flyer. If we're going more for value here and we want to go low, who do we got here? I think that a guy that I'm going to plug in to get action on this game is Vance McDonald. Since he's come back, he's looking pretty good. The targets are alarming to me. He doesn't have a lot, but he's getting the ball and he's getting looks down the field. He's not just catching 5-yard outs, and when he has the ball, he's getting yards after contact. We saw a stiff arm in his last game. He bulldozed through 3 or 4 guys. I think he might get in the end zone this week. I mean, we're looking at 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. That's what you want out of a tight end, especially if he's sub 5K. So for a guy like Vance McDonald at 3,700, we'll plug him in there, getting some value now. We'll be able to get a flex in the 6,700 range. So we'll probably get a pass catching back, which obviously you're going to get more opportunities there. You're going to look for that more often on DraftKings. See, Golden Tate exploded last week. Somebody I had in a couple of lineups, not as many. Didn't have any in tournament lineups, which if you had him in tournament lineups and you played chalk, then you definitely shifted the slate. Great game. I mean, overall, he's having a great year. I mean, he just gets peppered with targets out there. It doesn't stop. He got all of his targets last week, so that helps. His touchdown was pretty damn nice. I mean, he had 2 of them, but the one where he kind of just broke away was nice, skated on into the end zone. That's something that we could definitely play in cash against Green Bay. As a Packers fan, I think their defense is great. I think their stats are inflated a little bit. Kevin King's still injured. They still got their 2 rookie cornerbacks out there who are pretty good. Tramon Williams is actually having another good year after last year having a great year, the old man out there. Ideally, what would happen here, though, is if Giovanni Bernard, if Mixon's not playing, I'm putting in Bernard. I'm going down on defense, or maybe I'll go down at tight end. But for right now, if this is the slate that we're going to be working with, you obviously, or at least I like to get running backs here, and there's not just a lot of value here. I mean, we got all the way down here, Kareem Hunt. That's a value play. He had a great game right there. You're going up against Jacksonville. They might try and run the ball more to take pressure off the rookie quarterback. Marshawn Lynch has been great. I think I got to get up, though. In a flex, in this spot here, there's just a lot of dead space at running back. You don't really want to play Fournette. He's probably not going to play. Kareem Hunt's risky. There's a lot of wide receivers that have value there. So just looking at this again, first look, probably going to try and come up. I don't want to come up all the way to Connor. Probably going to try and come up to Barkley, which, I mean, I don't know if we can do that. That's a $1,000 difference. If we're going to come up to Barkley here, we're going to have to come off of one of these big names up here, so I don't know if I want to do that right now. Quarterback, I didn't really look too much at value there. I don't really want to go below 6K, especially with Cousins and Thielen connection. You know, what we could do is Vance McDonald. Obviously, in that game, I would like to keep him. But let's look lower here at a first look and see where he's at. Going up against the Jets, not a great matchup, but he got some targets right there. He had targets the week before, and that's only in half a game with Jake Butt playing. 4 targets, 7 in a full game. I don't mind that, especially in the red zone with tight ends. And if that's the case, we're able to fit Saquon there. That's actually really nice, actually. We're able to fit Saquon there. So looking at this lineup, this might even be a tournament flyer, cash. I mean, when I'm putting this together, I'm looking more towards tournaments. I play heavy tournaments, but I also play 50-50 with cash right now. Low risk money, nothing crazy in there. So looking at this lineup, I mean, we got Cousins. He's going to connect with Thielen. I think that's a pretty safe matchup. Cousins can go off for 50 passing attempts, 400 yards, and 3 scores. Gordon's solid. David Johnson, I think he's going to be more of a floater. Saquon's solid. I think Doug Baldwin's safe. We're really just looking at Cousins here, or Christian Kirk here, and we're looking at the tight end out. I don't even know how to say Herman out in Denver filling in. I feel good about this. This is just first look. I'm going to come out with another video later on in the week saying kind of what my finalized cash lineups are looking like, or my pool of players. My process is basically Sunday I just watch football all day. Monday kind of analyze what happened, get ready for Monday Night Football if I want to play anything in that. Usually we'll put something in a cash game. The tournaments in that are just so rough because if you win the tournament at a lot of money, which are low chances of doing it, usually you're splitting that $250,000 prize with 300 people. So you're winning a decent chunk of money if you're only putting $10 in. But it's such a jackpot or a lottery, and you're not winning too much as much as you should, based on the just low variance of the players that you're playing. So this is a lineup here. If we're just looking at opportunities, DJ is going to start to get the bulk of the carries there. The backup there, he's not. I mean, he took most of the carries this week. If we're looking really quick, 26 opportunities. Saquon's leading it there. Melvin Gordon. I know Ekeler's there, but he's still getting 75 to 85% of the overall workload there, especially goal line carries. Cousins and Thielen, that's connection. Doug Baldwin's going to make Russell Wilson even better. I think Russell Wilson in tournaments is going to be a sneaky play with having Baldwin back, probably having Carson back there as well. Kirk, I think maybe he gets 7 to 8 targets. If he can get you 15 points, that's great. The tight end's going to get some targets. Hopefully that continues. Bills D at home, I like. Kind of like this first look lineup here. I might play some of this, but like I said, we're going to look, gather as much information as possible. Friday comes, start to construct some lineups Saturday morning, figure out who's going to be active and inactive coming Saturday into Sunday, and see what we can do. See if there's going to be any backup values that we could put in there, maybe instead of David Johnson or Saquon Barkley. But the guys that I want to play are going to be Cousins, Thielen, and Gordon, just seeing this off the bat. And Doug Baldwin is a great low on. I think he'll be high owned in tournaments just because of that salary relief you get from him. And he's a #1 receiver there who's probably a 7K type of guy in most weeks. He's back from injury fine. So this is the first look, week 5, DraftKings. We're going to be back soon. Peace.